Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another monthly briefing. It's a good chance to see what happened in the previous month when it comes to digital development. And I got a feeling this month was somewhat easier than, at least that's my personal feeling, than the previous ones, maybe because it's around the holidays now and I feel more relaxed. But let's run through what took place, what were the key developments, and then what's coming in the next month, and we'll end up and wrap up the whole discussion with some of the regional discussions. I'll have a couple of colleagues with me today to help me with the inputs on some specific topics, but I encourage you to also share any of your thoughts at any point in the chat window, either questions, comments, your own impressions from the month, and so on. So we'll start with events in April, what took place in April. And there was a number of interesting events. Well, that's sort of a usual trend. We, within the Geneva Internet platform, we managed to follow on a couple of them with reports. It's not really possible to cover everything, but to the extent we can. And probably an interesting snapshot is on the UNCTAD e-commerce week. So Marilia, as always, is with us today. Marilia, maybe a few words about what happened at the UNCTAD e-commerce week and what were the key takeaways. Marilia.
Sure, Vlada, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, the e-commerce week took place in Geneva from 1 to 5 April under the theme From Digitalization to Development, and the idea that underpinned the e-commerce week this time was to develop tools to ensure that e-commerce can effectively contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. As we have seen in latest years in reports that have been published by several organizations such as the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, and UNCTAD itself, the digital gap is widening when it comes to the inclusion of the digital economy, and this is really threatening the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So across the different sessions during the e-commerce week, what we could see is that there are some key ways in which e-commerce could contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. But there are things that need to be done. The first of them is to support more closely small and medium-sized enterprises. We know that the number of enterprises in the digital economy is growing. However, they are not effectively being engaged in cross-border commerce for different reasons. So support needs to be given to these enterprises. And we could feel in the e-commerce week some echoing of the idea of the backlash with regards to big companies. So small and medium-sized enterprises need to be protected in a way that will allow them to effectively compete with these big companies. The second area in which actions need to be made is the development of legal and policy frameworks, especially in three different areas. One of them is cybersecurity, the second is privacy and data protection, and the third is consumer protection. And lastly, the policies and legal frameworks really need to put emphasis in places of the world that have not been included. And Africa is a continent that has largely been excluded from many of the benefits of the digital economy. Although progress has been made in recent years, more needs to be done. And so there were several sessions focused on Africa and how we could help entrepreneurs and medium-sized enterprises to effectively engage in e-commerce. The significant attention was paid in several sessions to the fact that negotiations on a treaty on e-commerce have started in the WTO. This was announced in January. We covered this development, and countries have started to put forward their positions. The division lines in the WTO between countries that are highly welcoming the negotiations and those that see it as with skepticism or as a way that could perhaps hamper the development of the digital industries in developing countries have been reproduced in the UNCTAD e-commerce week. So we could see that there's not consensus in this area. And finally, there have been several sessions dedicated to new technologies. So machine learning, artificial intelligence, 5G, quantum computing, and there were some calls to develop regulation in some of these areas from a trade perspective, particularly when it comes to algorithm decision making and competition. As Vlada mentioned, we have provided just-in-time reporting for most of the sessions. It's available on the website, and there's also a blog post summarizing what happened in the e-commerce week in our website, diplomacy.edu. Thanks. Over to you, Vlada.
Thanks, Marilia. So feel free to run through the reports. It was quite comprehensive. Another event which we reported from was the Second Western Balkans Digital Summit. Even though it's a regional event, it was quite interesting to observe, and I guess that's the trend in probably many other regions, that emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and sensors, 5G, are high on the agenda, regardless of the level of development of the region. The interesting bit was there was a lot of good exchange within the Western Balkans communities of good examples of usage of blockchain, of some of the sensor networks, a lot of e-government services. So in sense of the innovation and startups, there is a vibrant community here. The problem that was identified was mainly related to lack of strategic approach by the governments of the region, lack of cooperation when it comes to formal level, and probably one of the main things that needs to be done, and I guess again it's not only when it comes to the Western Balkans, is the investment in the education and developing competencies in a more strategic way, not necessarily related just to IT, but also on a multidisciplinary level, because the labor that we require or are looking at here and around the world is actually not the IT people. It's many levels and layers of knowledge. There is a report from all the sessions from the Western Balkans Digital Summit as well. There will be the final report from the event coming, I think, next week. So you're invited to take a look at that one. And then finally, picking from a couple of those listed here, is the World Summit on Information Society 2019 that took place in Geneva. It's already a traditional event, the annual event. Itself, it's a good place for networking and exchange of experiences. The biggest focus was actually on the use of the ICT when it comes to sustainable development goals, and that's sort of a pitch which we see more and more in different fora, that the ICT things are being closely related and anchored to the SDGs and to the achievements of the SDGs. There are reports from most of digital policy sessions, so I won't take much more time on this. I encourage you to run through and see what took place. And then moving to the main developments in April. As those of you that have been with us in previous months and years, you know that we prepare sort of a barometer, which basically shows the pressure, the level of the importance or the pulse of the digital policy developments in the previous month comparing to the previous month. So we try to emphasize the aspects of the topics that gain some relevance in the previous months. So I'll run through some of the issues. There will be more details online again afterwards, but running through the main topics. Focusing on those that are high on the barometer level. Security is that's again a traditional things that we always have some I would say interesting bits when it comes to security. This time there were, let's say, two main bits. One is the G7 meeting led by France, which had a strong component on cyber, and the final declaration of G7 also brought in, or the one of the outputs was a dinner declaration on the cyber norms initiative, where basically, and we can say it was sort of expected, that the France is going to push the main bits that are in the Paris Goal document, and generally supporting or inviting its partners within G7 to push forward on the exchange of information, best practices, lessons learned when it comes to implementation of the norms, voluntary non-binding norms, and responsible state behavior. So the declaration itself didn't bring anything new. It is sort of we can say there is a new initiative, the Cyber Norm Initiative, At the moment, it is launched within the G7, but they invite all the other partners, probably mainly like-minded, to support this exchange of experiences. At the same time, there was a joint ministerial communique, which also focused within important part on cyber activities, and basically and quite directly referred to the activities of North Korea and the threats that are coming from Russia, according to G7 partners, and encourage China in a more mild tone, more friendly tone, to uphold to its commitments not to engage with malicious cyber activities, particularly related to intellectual property theft. So more or less nothing that new. The other interesting development was, even though it's not that new, is the Russian bill on stable operations of the Russian internet. We have seen, and we've discussed it in previous editions as well, now we've seen it go through the State Duma, the lower chamber, which adopted the law on stable operations of Runet. There are more than just security perspective of this bill, of course. There's the economical as well, and the content policy and control of the content as well. But as a main driver, which is usually raised, is security. What are the key components? It probably gets more and more clear, even though the law itself is quite vague, still not defining clearly some of the components. But we can say that some of the main components of that is that within the Russian Telecommunication Authority, Roskomnadzor, there will be a center that will coordinate the work of telecoms particularly in case of emergencies. Then, topologically speaking, organizationally speaking, the internet traffic will be routed exclusively through the internet exchange points which are approved by the Ministry of Communication and in cooperation with the Federal Securities Service. The telecom operators will be required to install specific technical equipment that will filter internet traffic for illegal content, and that will protect the Russian internet from threats in case needed. And finally, there will be some sort of a Russian DNS established. We don't have much of the information on that. What we could learn is, and it seems reasonable, that the first step will be actually mapping all the different connections, servers, services, and so on within Russia, so that there is a clear topology of what parts of the network actually belong to or are seated in Russian Federation, and then trying to map them and organize them somehow. Whether this is going to be a completely new or separate DNS, that's still quite a big question. Thus far, we have learned that the alternative DNS services can hardly work with the global one hand in hand. So it's still to see how this is going to work. A brief reflection on why this is important beyond Russia is that there was a lot of skepticism beyond going into the human rights aspects and content control and surveillance, was that by a lot of experts from the technical community that this is merely a wish list, and that simply most likely it will cause quite some congestion, because if you try to route all of the content through just number of internet exchange points, that could be a bottleneck. That technically speaking, it will definitely remove some of the advantages that internet has, not only the openness but the resilience, end-to-end networking, and all the principles might be slightly endangered. Since the whole law is not clear yet, we don't know how this is going to be implemented. But the possible effect is that if it appears that it works, in technical sense, that it might possibly drive other countries to consider following the same example. We'll probably discuss that in the months to come. We can expect that this law will be finally approved by the President somewhere in November, and we'll monitor how the implementation actually goes from that point on. Moving to the e-commerce and internet economy, there are a couple of interesting bits. Most of them, or all of them, you can also find on the Digital Watch platform. But there is an interesting, probably again, update that China considers shutting down the cryptocurrency mining operations. And when we discussed with our colleague Arvin, who is closely following on cryptocurrencies and policies, he commented that that's yet another decision by the Chinese government. So Arvin, I would happily pass the floor to you to briefly explain what does that mean when it comes to the new decision of China. Arvin, floor is yours.
Thanks, Vlada. Hi to everyone. Hope you can hear me, guys, and see me. Well, as Vlada mentioned, and it's already on our DV Watch, of course, as an update, at the beginning of April, the National Development and Reform Commission from China, which is a top economic planning agency in China, actually released a list of sectors it plans to promote, sectors which plans to restrict or even eliminate from the China overall industry. Of course, one of the prominent, as Vlada mentioned, the prominent industry which was suggested to be actually eliminated is cryptocurrency mining. And why is this? What's the reason behind it? Of course, the environmental impact that Bitcoin mining is causing in China. As we all know, cryptocurrency mining and security of the systems and blockchains are mostly secured by the computer power, by the processor power of everyone who's doing this mining or participating in the networks. The biggest mining operations in the world were in China, and almost 70% of the whole hashing power in this cryptocurrency networks is in China. Why was this? Basically, because all of this industry is developed and scarce through the parts of China which are not developed, central parts of China, with subsidized electricity, which means that the governments actually subsidize electricity pay for that and use enormous amounts of hydropower. So in this proposal from the China government, they actually try to restrict this and try to suggest that Bitcoin industry is Bitcoin mining industry is no longer desirable in China. In a sense, they try to move to the more cleaner and more efficient, energy efficient technologies. This might actually comes true throughout China's the entire regulatory framework, but it might actually not make a significant difference. But as Vlada mentioned earlier, this is a 7th try from the China government to actually impose some kind of ban of cryptocurrency or ban of cryptocurrency mining. Those similar lists as this one were already merged in 2011 and 2014, and many of these industries listed to be shut down in China or restricted are still there, still in China, still working. So this might be a step towards the China controlling the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining, but might not end up like that. Especially, we need to mention that in this area, in a local industry development, the local government actually has a lot to say. So if there is any, let's say, rejection to this, or any local government's second thoughts on maybe reducing the industry, this might not happen in such a short time. So China, of course, will still lead the world in mining operations, but there are other countries and states, regions which are trying to now, by subsidizing the energy, actually track this kind of this industry back to their respective countries. That would be it. Thanks, Vlada.
Thanks, Harun. It's quite useful to remember that there might be more than one reasons, or there's layers of reasons, and in this case, probably energy plays an important role in decision making. And sometimes we forget how complex these decisions or how many factors impact them. Thanks, Erwin. Moving on to the second set of month, where you can see the digital rights and the jurisdiction and legal issues, mainly around the Facebook scandals and data protection on one hand, on the other hand, about the misinformation operations, particularly in light of the upcoming elections in a number of countries. We've seen things happening in India, then the EU elections that are coming, and so on. We'll get back to that in a minute, when we'll focus actually as one of the trends there. But it's definitely worth mentioning under the digital rights part, the WikiLeaks arrest or Julian Assange arrest by the UK police. There are, of course, a number of comments in the public and by the communities on that. At the same time, Ecuador reported a high level, or much higher than usual level of cyber attacks following the arrest of Assange. So that's an interesting note. We'll get back to these developments in a short while. And then looking into infrastructure, net neutrality. Infrastructure didn't have that high pulse this month. However, I would like to note the controversy on Huawei, which has not reduced, basically. And we have seen some last couple of days some developments, particularly when it comes to the UK, which there was a leaked document that the UK is going to allow Huawei's role in 5G network, though not on critical aspects of the network. At the same time, the US State Department was open to warn UK even openly that there might be limits in intelligence sharing if UK and other partners allow Huawei to be in the network. It is important to note that the GCHQ, basically the security sector of the UK, is not against Huawei's involvement. They say, or the chief says, that there are ways to mitigate the risks while benefiting from what Huawei can offer. And at the same time, there might be a huge loss for UK if they, at this point, stop the plans for the 5G network because of changes towards Huawei policy. So again, there are a lot of layers of these decisions that we can take into account. Probably the UK, this battle over UK for Huawei will be something that will heavily influence other countries around Europe, and then the Huawei's position on the global market. When it comes to the new technologies, finally, the AI the artificial intelligence, particularly facial recognition technology aspects, were high on the agenda this month. And I will pass the floor to Katarina, who is our chief person for following the artificial intelligence development, and she was also in lead of the research on data and diplomacy, and currently the project on AI and diplomacy, and the course which is running, but we'll mention that later. Katarina, you may briefly run through a couple of main developments when it comes to AI aspects throughout April. Katarina.
Okay, thanks, Vlada. So as you can see on the slide, we highlight 4 developments, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to 2 developments in particular. So the first one, which is really interesting to note, is that there's been quite some concerns, protests, and even refusal to sell AI facial recognition software. So what we've seen was a letter by 25 of the most prominent AI researchers addressed to Amazon, expressing concern over Amazon's selling of facial recognition software, and concerns especially about human rights and the impact this could have on the most vulnerable and the most marginalized, in particular people of color and women. At the same time, 2 weeks ago, we also saw Microsoft refusing actually to sell facial recognition software to law enforcement agencies in California. And here a similar argument, there were concerns about human rights. And also interestingly, this was expressed in the sense that the training data used for this facial recognition was apparently predominantly white, So Microsoft itself expressed concerns over the use of facial recognition software by law enforcement agencies and the potential biases that can come in through that. So that's really interesting to note. And the other thing I think is well worth highlighting is developments at the level of the EU. So we've seen quite a few months of consultations through the EU high-level expert group, now leading to their publication of ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. And what we've seen is very human-centric, so humanity and the common good for humanity is at the center of this trustworthy AI. The report outlines principles to guide the use and development of AI, but at the same time it also thinks about how to operationalize this, so how to put this into practice. There are three key principles, which are AI needs to be lawful, ethical, and robust. And robustness both in terms of the technical side, but also the interaction of the technological side with the societal sphere. In the report, we also see 7 requirements for trustworthy AI outlined, and I'm going to highlight 4, which are human agency and oversight. This is something we hear a lot when it comes to discussions around AI, privacy and data governance, transparency and accountability. And if you look at an example such as facial recognition, which is machine learning, which is artificial neural networks, this call for transparency and accountability is particularly hard to meet. So I think over the next couple of months, if not years, we're going to see a lot of discussion around these principles and how to put these principles into practice. So having said a little bit more about these 2 developments in April, I'm going to hand over to Vlada again. But if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to address them either here or at some point later via email or in any other way. But for now, over to you, Vlada.
Thanks, Katarina. Glenn shared some of the useful links when it comes to AI deployment and responsibilities. We can get back to the questions later on. Let's run through the trends, and I will come back and review all the comments and questions. Moving on to the trends of the month. It's sort of interesting that some trends are repeating. It's not unexpected, of course. And out of the 3 trends that we picked up this month are actually the misinformation issues related to particularly to elections, but not only. And then the role of big players such as primarily Facebook, of course, when it comes to controlling the effects and the whole mismanagement of information. The second one is related to data breaches, and we see more and more pressure on companies, but also more of the breaches. And again, Facebook is playing a crucial role in this month's trend related to breaches and data protection. And the third trend is a little bit unusual, but it's quite important, and that's digital health, which is in focus. Moving on to the first trend, and the elections, I pass the floor to Marilia. So Marilia will run through the first and the second trend, and I'll get back to you on the digital health. Marilia, over to you.
Thanks, Vlada. As you said, misinformation promises to be one of the big issues related to technology this year, and it's understandable because it touches upon the very heart of democracy. We have several elections coming up this year, and we are unsure of how misinformation could play a role when it comes to discussions leading to elections. So companies are taking proactive measures. An example is Facebook. In the context of the Indian elections, which are ongoing, Facebook has changed its policies, particularly aiming to tighten the way that people can book ads online. So if you want to book an ad in India right now, a political one, you need to state who you are, first of all, your identity, your location, where you are posting from, and who is actually paying for this ad. And once the ad is posted, it will be published with a disclaimer saying paid for by or published by. And this is a way to bring more transparency when it comes to ads. Another interesting feature they are proposing is to archive these ads for a period of 7 years. in a searchable database. So if there are doubts when it comes to the ads, you can always go back and check. And finally, they have proposed to create some regional standby teams in order to deal with misinformation in a more speedy manner. But of course, not everyone is happy with the measures proposed by Facebook. When the measures have been made public online, these raised concern particularly from the side of the European Commission. They sent a letter to Facebook saying that they are concerned about the new measures, particularly when it comes to the need to register in a particular country to be able to publish ads. In the context of upcoming European elections in May, that could be very cumbersome for people to have to register in different European countries to be able to post ads in the context of elections which are cross borders. So we see from this example that it's very hard to find a one-size-fits-all solution. Perhaps Facebook will need to adapt when it comes to other elections which are not national as a base. But we see that more and more companies are taking into account geographic boundaries when they develop their policies. And it's a very interesting development as well, that digital policy sort of is getting back to the digital, to the base of territory when we try to design digital policies. And it's interesting to see as well that it seems that liability for content has more or less been accepted by different sides. The authorities are holding platforms accountable, and platforms are also taking action, showing that they sort of recognize and accept that they have a responsibility on the matter, which is a change from what we have seen in previous years. So this is the core of this first trend. Moving on to the second trend that has been mentioned by Vlada, it is related to data breaches, which is something that is not new. And the data breaches this month, Facebook has been the focus again. We had another case of news coming to the public light. A cybersecurity firm found out that two very large troves of data concerning Facebook users were publicly posted on Amazon cloud servers. This allegedly touches upon more than 500 million Facebook users. And probably this data has been leaked by two different app developers that published the information online or were not very mindful with the security of this information. And of course, these developments that puts into question the call from Mark Zuckerberg saying that he wanted platforms to be more privacy focused, and Facebook wanted to develop a more privacy focused app. And this was announced recently, but it seems that Facebook is having a hard time in keeping personal data safe and under their control. So this brings doubts to the call. And we will also recall that last month Zuckerberg called for more governmental regulation on internet companies, and the UK Information Commissioner officer made a sort of a joke, but saying, okay, if they want more regulation, will then Facebook drop the appeal on the fine that they received after Cambridge Analytica, because this is what regulation is about as well. So we will see how this case will unfold. But we had news in Sri Lanka as well after the terrorist attacks, and showing that the Sri Lanka government has blocked access to social media, some apps, VPNs. So we see that the problem with misinformation is widespread, is global. It touches upon different types of platforms, and this is a trend that is ongoing and will probably continue to be important in the following months. Over to you, Vlada.
Thanks, Marilia. It seems like Facebook will be a very frequent guest in our updates, and I hope it might be on a positive side as well at some point. Okay, moving on to the third trend of the month, which is digital health. This is not something often in the focus because it doesn't have space to dominate over other security and data protection aspects. But this time there were a couple of interesting developments. But before that, when we talk about digital health, we basically look at it as with any other technology. We look at it as a tool that can enhance the health options, improve people's health, individual levels such as wearables or IoT sensors and stuff, and also on the national level, such as the health national strategies, the health databases, and so on, health data and so on. Particularly important will be artificial intelligence, IoT, and all these emerging technologies. But then that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, again, the impacts of technology or policy aspects of that, or if you wish, digital health as a topic on the agenda. And there, of course, we see the implications which are related to data protection, again, particularly sensitive personal aspects of health data. Then security, and we see more and more health industry players that are being targeted by cybercrime, ransomware, and so on. Of particular importance will be updating the regulations and creating policy environments which can encourage the development of the health digital tools in health, but also mitigate the risks. Now, of course, one example is the GDPR, which provides a high level of protection for health data. But we might be seeing more of such examples. You can find on the Digital Watch there is a dedicated page under the trends on digital health, and we'll be following also on these developments. One of the reasons, of course, is because it's becoming an increasingly important market as well. So what are the three developments of this month that made us find or see that as a trend of the month? The first one is well, two of them are related to the World Health Organization. WHO recommended 10 ways, or provided guidelines that recommend 10 ways in which countries can use digital health technology to improve people's health. Among others, it's offering the possibility of registering births via mobile phones and offering e-learning for training for health professionals and so on. So you can take a look and you might find some interesting examples and recommendations. The second one is interesting, particularly for young parents, which is that the WHO also offered guidelines on the amount of screen time for children as the screen time or the devices impact their sleep and the motorics. And for instance, for kids up to 2 years old, the screens are not recommended, while for those between 2 and 5 years, maximum of a daily screen time should not go over 1 hour per day. So that's quite an interesting takeaway. And WHO is generally increasingly concerned about the kids' well-being. They've also classified the gaming addiction as a disorder last year. So things are moving in that direction as well. And then we've also seen the French Health Ministry updated its legal framework for hosting health data, and in particular the obligations for service providers and health practitioners when collecting and processing data. So we might see more of these trends in future. And that will be the last trend of the month. And by the way, thanks Glenn for sharing the update on the Global Humanitarian Technology Conference of the IEEE. What strikes me with your example is that the IEEE as an engineering forum is actually following the SDGs as thematic areas, which is amazing. It's a good example of how technological and well, political and diplomatic fora can combine and go along the same track. Thanks for sharing, and I think all of you can see the link to the event. Okay, moving to what's coming in May. April, May, June are usually very hot when it comes to events and digital policies. There are a couple of interesting events. One is back to the Southeastern Europe. It's the CDIG annual meeting, so the regional Internet Governance Forum of the Southeastern Europe, which is taking place in Bucharest. You can see it is the 5th one. So if anyone is around or willing, feel free to join, and there will be online participation as well. Then we have the 22nd session of the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, the CSTD in Geneva. and then a couple of other things which are coming after us. Marilia, if you wish to comment anything on the CSTD event, feel free to jump in. Now you can also reflect through the chat if there are any interesting bits. One thing we didn't put here is the high-level panel, because we are still waiting for some official news on the high-level panel on digital cooperation by the United Nations. And what is expected is the report will probably be done in the beginning of June. At this moment, the panel is preparing for the report. There were a number of public consultations, particularly online, in also the regional ones in Africa, which took part last week, and then in Latin America and so on. So try to follow the website of the Digital Cooperation High-Level Panel, and you'll find the announcements for the virtual meetings you can join. When it comes to the DiploFoundation work, or Geneva Internet Platform work, there are two announcements in a way. One is the April issue of the newsletter. We are playing a little bit, we're experimenting, so the new edition will have some more, some new things over there, such as dedicated section on data analytics, and we encourage any impressions and suggestions from your side how we can make the newsletter even more relevant to your daily work. And then starting as of 6th of May, the new online course that we are launching, Diplo, on artificial intelligence, technology governance and policy frameworks, and Katarina, whom you just met again online, is in lead for the course. So if you have any questions or thoughts, let us know. I'll close this part, and before we go to the regional developments, let me open the floor for questions, and let's see if there are any particular aspects we should reflect more on. Marco, who is our online moderator, was following the discussions in the chat. Marco, the floor is yours. Go on.
Thank you, Vlada. Let me highlight some of the reflections and questions that arose in the chat discussion. There is a first reflection by Nigel about the e-commerce week, so I guess it's something that maybe Marilia can pick up on and elaborate on. It was saying that it was concerned about calls in the e-commerce week for regulation of data flows, in particular in that the e-commerce week, during the e-commerce week, the regulation of data flows was being discussed as a cure for bad content, like hate speech, misinformation, without any voices noting the economic harm such regulation can bring. So maybe, Marilia, if you want to reflect on that, if it's something that you also have highlighted in your report, and if there were also any other threads that complemented these views, since you summarized the whole discussions taking place. Thank you to Glenn, as Vladimir, as you were saying, because he was mentioning that the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, has launched a blockchain society and an online course on that, and he was also sharing some updates with us about the 9th Global Humanitarian Technology Conference, which will be taking place in Seattle in October this year, so later this year. We have also another question by Mike Nelson regarding blockchain. I know, Arvin, you have answered this in the chat, but if you want to elaborate further, please feel free to do. It was saying that blockchain can be used to avoid censorship since the database is immutable. Is that an issue? The last question we have from June Paris. She's elaborating, so maybe this question is for Katarina, about the link between transparency and AI. And she was asking, she was saying actually that transparency is a debatable issue. In particular, how much transparency can be there when the design stages have different levels of secrecy. Especially, she was saying, during initial stages of development a new technology where copyright or secrecy can be there. So how much transparency can be achieved? And then we have also some later reflections from Katarina. She was just sharing the fact that during the AI for Good Global Summit at the end of May, we will also be there with a session. And one from Ginger, actually, she was commenting on the WHO guidelines on gaming, and she was stressing that the WHO's attention was on the sedentary habit. rather than the screen time, which is also present, of course. These are the main points that arose. I will follow the discussion and also ask you for the floor if there is anything else that will come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Maybe Marilia, firstly, if you want quick reflections, if I caught it correctly, on e-commerce week and then on the transparency, and then we can see if Arvin also wants to jump in. Marilia.
Thanks, Vlada, and thanks, Nigel, for this observation. Well, in fact, data flows are one of the key topics that have appeared even before the negotiations started officially in January, when countries were putting forward their positions in the WTO with regards to the future of negotiations. They always mention data flows from a perspective of guaranteeing data flows, because data flows today, they underpin not only the commerce of services, which are immaterial, but also the commerce of goods, because many goods have been immaterialized, and we also depend on data flows to process things like marketing and payment. So data flows are in the base of everything. Or in the other perspective, this country is saying that actually seamless data flows are only guaranteeing that the winners of the current digital economy will just amass more information, larger amounts of data, and it's just guaranteeing that they will sustain their leader positions in the digital economy, preventing competition from new players. And from what I see, these are the key division lines. Of course, when you talk about data localization, then data localization usually is justified either from a privacy security perspective, and we have many countries that adopt caveats to data flows because of these reasons, including countries in Europe and elsewhere, or justified, and this is a growing trend that we see in the UNCTAD e-commerce week and discussions in the WTO public forum, for instance, justifying data flows so that developing countries can use this data, data localization, so these countries that localize data, they can use it for their digital transformations and for their development. So I think that the economic justification for data localization is growing in importance in UNCTAD discussions and in the WTO as well. And this is gaining more prominence than the justifications that we had before that are related to privacy and to security. And I would put your comment on misinformation under the umbrella of sort of hampering data flows for security concerns. So I think in the future we will see, because the negotiations have started, these economic arguments to localize data and to sort of put caveats to data flows, these economic arguments becoming more prominent and more strong. And I saw that happening in several sessions during the e-commerce week.
Thanks, Marilia. Quick reflection then from Arvin on blockchain. I know you posted it briefly, but if you wish to add something, Arvin.
Thanks, Vlada. Yes, as Mike asked is about the blockchain in China. So blockchain can and it is most powerful weapon to avoid censorship. And the Mike is asking, this is the issue why China is doing this. Yes, basically the most all of the attempts from China to actually control the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is due to the peer-to-peer nature of the network and resistance, of course, to the censorship. So this is the main reason, but it's not stated in this document. In the document, it's stated that the cryptocurrency industry is dirty, kind of spend a lot of energy, and environmental reasons are actually in this report are emphasized as why China is considering to ban the mining. Thanks, Vlada.
Thanks, Arvin. Again, multi-layered reasons. Quick reflection to Ginger's comment. Yes, thanks for clarifying. It is not, well, it's not only about kids looking into the screens, but it's rather about sitting for too long and the lack of interaction and then social engagement. So also the recommendations by the WHO actually say that instead of having kids looking at the screen, sitting and looking at the screen, you should play the games with them, put the puzzles, let them run outside and so on. And they even recommend certain amounts of time that kids should be out or running, be very active, or be socially engaged and so on. But thanks for clarifying. Okay, wrapping up these discussions, and then as a final part, as always, we are running through a couple of regional updates. It's quite important and interesting to see actually what are the key topics and developments in different regions, and we see the differences from region to region. So we'll look into Africa, Asia, Middle East, North Africa, and the Caribbean. And I pass the floor to Andriana, who is going to lead us through the updates from the regions. Andriana.
Thank you, Vlada. Since time is quickly running out, let's just dive right into it. First of all, we will hear the updates from Africa from the last month, and we will hear from Grace. So Grace, without further ado, over to you.
Updates from Africa, April 2019, a very exciting month for the continent after the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement came into force. This is after Gambia ratified the agreement, bringing the number of ratifications to 22, and 22 is the magic number that was required for the agreement to come into force. Commenting on this, the Africa Union Commissioner for Trade, Ambassador Albert Muchanga, explained that come July, the continent would now enter the implementation phase of the agreement, where we'd see countries making moves to facilitate the free movement of goods and people. And to another story, Jumia, which is Africa's largest e-commerce site, listed at the New York Stock Exchange, a very successful IPO with the stock trading at an average of $25. But here in the continent, the news was received with mixed reactions. A lot of people questioning the branding of Jumia as an African company. Well, you know, Jumia was founded by two French entrepreneurs. It's registered in Germany, and a lot of the technical and engineering decisions are made outside the continent. And a human rights story where the executive director of CIPESA, an ICT and digital rights NGO that is based in Uganda, was denied entry into Tanzania on April 25th. Dr. Wakabi was actually detained at the airport for hours and questioned over national security concerns. He was seeking to enter Tanzania to join Tanzanians in celebrating the National Human Rights Defenders Day, but finally he was deported out of Tanzania. And this comes just months after two journalists from the Committee to Protect Journalists were detained for a couple of days in the country over similar national security concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. And now we are moving to Asia. The updates from Asia will be provided by Amrita. So Amrita, go ahead.
Welcome to the regional update from Asia for the month of April. The Australian government has passed the Criminal Code Amendment Sharing of Abhorrent Violent Material Bill, which makes a crime for social media platforms not to promptly remove abhorrent violent material shared by their users. The crime would be punishable for people working for online companies by 3 years in prison and a fine of 10% of the platform's annual turnover. In India, the Madras High Court lifted the interim ban on the popular Chinese short video application TikTok, which was passed on 3rd April after the government was asked to prohibit further downloads, calling it dangerous for children. The Chinese government has ordered the elimination of 9 national messaging apps as they pose a severe threat to public security. The shutdown is aiming at limiting the spread of pornographic content and facilitation of prostitution. The Hong Kong International Arbitration Center became the first foreign institution permanently accredited to hear disputes in Russia. The GSM Association launched the Mobile Economic Pacific Island 2019 report. The report suggests that for Pacific Islands to unlock the full potential of mobile, they need to improve digital divide, enhance access to sufficient spectrum for better coverage and capacity, and provide affordable and high-quality mobile services. In Australia, Tamworth City is to become the first fully integrated smart city in the country, and this transition will include installing IoT applications as part of transportation, energy, health, telecommunication and other municipal services by using the city's existing wireless network. Thank you.
Thank you for those updates, Amrita. And now we are moving to Northeast and, to MENA region with Noha. Noha, please go ahead.
The first update in April is from Iran, where banned social media messaging applications hinder emergency relief. Since March 2019, Iran has been witnessing heavy floods that resulted in tens of casualties in 31 provinces. The situation was aggravated by the ban of social media applications, which encumbered reporting on landslides and falling rocks, and hence emergency relief and mobilization by aid workers to reach affected areas. Iranians, including government officials, journalists, and citizens, have condemned such practice and called upon the government to lift the censorship on social media applications, even if temporarily. On 27th March, the state's cyber police force issued a statement warning against reporting on the flooding of social media or being prosecuted for disturbing public opinion and disrupting the peace in society. The second update is from Dubai. The Dubai Future Council on Artificial Intelligence held its meeting this month and started discussions on how artificial intelligence can be used to enhance Dubai's status as a future global city. Chaired by the Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, the Council has a double purpose. It will work on enhancing the awareness of the public and private sectors about the importance of applying artificial intelligence technologies in education, healthcare, innovation, and other sectors of the economy and society. The Council is also mandated to support research focused on creating a legislative and regulatory environment that meets the needs of all stakeholders vis-à-vis the development and deployment of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Noha. And the last update, regional update for today, will be from the Caribbean region, and Andre Edwards will present it. Go ahead, Andre.
Andre Edwards with Caribbean updates. First, agriculture-based blockchain initiative in Haiti. A blockchain project focused on streamlining the agriculture value chain has been launched in Haiti. The Ministry of Industry and Commerce of Haiti and the Business and Investment Development Project have selected AgriLedger as the company to coordinate this pilot. As part of this World Bank-funded project, the traceability of the value chain of fresh fruits coming from various provinces, along with payments, will be facilitated. Farmers are expected to sell directly, gaining a price that more accurately reflects supply and demand. Jamaican ICT experts advocate against net neutrality. Several Jamaican ICT experts are advocating for a tiered levy on enterprise internet users, moving away from net neutrality. With net neutrality, an ISP treats all broadband users equally. The Jamaica Computer Society immediate past president Sheldon Poe and current president Dr. Sean Thorpe are lobbying for smaller digital firms not having the same charges applied and being allowed to pay based on actual consumption as they utilize less of the available bandwidth than much larger companies that consume much greater portions. Orange's French Caribbean subsea cable upgraded. The Kanawha subsea cable was originally launched by Orange in January 2019 and links French Guiana with Martinique and Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean. This two-pier fiber system is 1,746 kilometers in length and has been upgraded to provide up to 10 terabits to users. This increased high-speed connectivity is expected to meet the rapid growth and demand for digital services in the Caribbean region.
Thank you, Andre, and once again, thank you to Grace, Amrita, and Noha for all the updates you have shared. I will be dumping in the chat the link for all regional updates. The updates for April 2019 will be posted shortly. Lara, I will pass the floor over to you now for the final conclusions and the wrap-up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Andriana. Thanks to the colleagues for the great regional updates. With that, we close the briefing of the month. The recording will be available soon on our website. The next briefing is again the last Tuesday of the month. The last Tuesday of May is May 28th. So see you on May 28th. And in the meantime, let us know if you have any takeaways of your own of the developments in the month. Next time in May, send us. We'll be happy to include them in the briefing. Thank you again for joining, and thanks for the team for realizing the briefing. See you end of May. Bye bye.